I want to speak a little bit about hope. There are different forms of hope we can have. There is a unbiblical hope, and there's a biblical hope. The unbiblical hope can be categorized as people who claim they have no hope at all, but it's rather difficult to live for long without any sort of hope. But there are some people who don't seem to have much of a hope. There are people who have an ill-defined hope, and there are people who have a misplaced hope. Misplaced, that is to say, putting it in the wrong thing. But a person cannot live for long without some hope. And the problem is that whether you're a believer or not, you will be tempted to put your hope in the wrong object. We've talked before about the difference between hoping for something and hoping in something. And if you recall that distinction, to hope for something is perfectly legitimate. This is what we do in our petitionary and in our intercessory prayers. We are expressing our hope for, or we would like a thing, a desire, and there's nothing wrong with it, and expressing the desires of your heart and offering that up to God. But at the same time, though, there's a huge difference between hoping for something and hoping in it. Because at the point at which you hope in something, particularly if it's something God did not promise, you're really going to set yourself up for tremendous disappointment in the end. And so the issue is going to be that you are to put your hope in only one thing, and that is God Himself and the promises He makes. If you put your hope in anything else, it will not really sustain you. It will not be a living hope. It will not carry you through the course of your life. It will let you down. And you and I have been born again, according to 1 Peter, to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Most men we know have put their hope in things that let them down, and it was a dead hope. It's something that didn't sustain itself. It did not deliver what it was promised. And then we know in this world, so often, things promise so much, but they never seem to deliver. And only, I believe, the one who made us, for whom we were made, can really deliver on those promises, because He Himself has crafted us, created us for a purpose, and because He's sovereign, He's able to, in fact, accomplish that. Nothing can defeat His purposes. And because He's good, His purposes are always for your best good. Always desiring what's best, even though you and I will frequently disagree with Him as to what your best interests look like. Nevertheless, He Himself knows what they are and pursues them, so that His desire for you is always that which is good and acceptable and perfect. The will of God, Romans 12:2, is that which is good and acceptable and perfect. So when we put our hope in Him and in His purposes and His will, then we live in hope in such a way that we could live a day that if Jesus were to come tomorrow, we would live in such a way that we would not be disappointed. We would not be ashamed. 1 John chapter 2, if you turn with me there's an interesting verse that describes that. And this is a very good way to live. It's in verse 28. 1 John 2:28. Now, little children, abide in Him. It's an image that John uses a great deal. And He picked it up from Jesus, because in the whole imagery in John 15, when He spoke about abiding in me as a branch who abides in the vine, so you draw your life from me. Now, little children, abide in Him, so that when He appears, and when He says when He appears, that could be really, in the context, any time at all. There's no contingency. When He appears, we may have confidence and not shrink away from Him in shame at His coming. And what He's saying here is, if you were to live each day as if tomorrow would be the last, or that this evening would be the last, then you would live in such a way that you would abide in Him. You'd draw your life from Him. You derive your life, because ours is a derived existence, as you know. We are not necessary beings. We're contingent beings. We depend for our vitality on someone else. And the beauty of this image of Christ in you, the hope of glory, is that now you have His life in you. And you have given up the old life, what we had in the self, And now we have the life of Christ, a life that has no beginning, a life that has no end. And we draw our life from Him as a branch would draw its life from the vine. And that the branch bears fruit because it's the conduit for life, and that's excess life. And so as we do this, he tells us, we will then be in a position so that when He appears, and He will, then he says we may have confidence and not shrink away from Him in shame at His coming. So it's a rather good image, I think, for us to live in such a way, using your own imagination, use your creative energies, your abilities, to think clearly how that would be like, and to live this day, to treasure it as if it were your last. And that, in my view, is a very wise and prudent way to live, to treasure each day as if it could be the last, for how do you know it won't be? It would be presumptuous to suppose that we have a month from now, a day from now, let alone a year. So this is why I believe that we do well to embrace this day-by-day perspective, understanding that living really is a daily process. Each day has enough, what did he say? Trouble of its own, anxiety or worry or trouble each day. And that's why I've many times when we were talking about this said that you never want to put the freight of more than one day on today. Today was not meant to carry a week, but instead it's only meant to carry what you have to encounter this week, this day rather, and only this day, and each day must be lived in that manner. And so if we see it that way, then we live, I think, prudently and wisely. So we are creative. We live as if that were the case. We treat relationships as if that were the case as well. We treat relationships with closure, so that if we discovered we would not see another person again, that other person, that there would have been closure. And I think it's a wise way to live. Now I fear that in spite of what I've just said, we, even as followers of Jesus, in difficult times, will be tempted to transfer our hope to the wrong thing. It's going to be easy for us to do. Especially when a man is thrashing around and trying to find his bearings. He may try to grab onto anything that's available. And I'm sure you've all heard the story about the fellow who fell off a cliff and was hanging only by a little branch on the side of the cliff, hundreds of feet above. And he cries out for help, and he hears the voice, and it's an angel who says to him, "Yes, I can help you." He says, "Do you want me to help you?" "Yes, I do." He says, "Listen, what I want you to do then, I will help you, but you've got to first let go. Let go of the branch." The guy looks around for a while and says, "Hey, is there anyone else up there?" You can let go. There's that terrifying moment when the when you're going from one trapeze to another, and you got to let go of one before you can fly to the other. And that moment of letting go is a scary moment. I remember when I first did rappelling, and how many of you guys have done that? Rappelling off of a cliff. You know what that's like, don't you? The first time you did it, what was it like? I mean, all your instincts are challenged, are they not? And we had an exercise in which you fall backwards, and everything about you fights that, into the arms of some people who are there to hold you, so that you've tried that out already and you've done that. But it's still, everything about you cries out. And it's one of those moments you just can't forget. It's indelibly etched in my memory about that moment. We were about 100 feet off the ground, and here I have to pull back and virtually let go and entrust my life into these other people's hands. No easy task. But unless you let go, you cannot go to the next, and the next, and the next. And so life is a series, really, of letting go. But actually making sure that that you're committing your life to the right hands. That is why they demonstrated very clearly, it was cogent and reasonable to suppose that, in fact, this was a good and wise thing to do. This is why when we fly in an airplane, we normally don't even bother looking to see who's in the cockpit. These complete strangers in there. We've entrusted our lives to these complete strangers in that cockpit. Who knows what they've been up to? But the point is, but you see, because the airline has a reasonably good record, if you recall, in Rain Man, he would only fly Qantas because that was the only airline that didn't have an accident. But the fact is that you have a reasonably good chance when you get on there. In fact, probably a better chance